Hello, everyone, and welcome to New Consciousness Review. Our guest today is the very fascinating J.D. Messenger. He began his adult life as a fireman, then went on to be one of 37 distinguished graduates from the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis. And he served as a nuclear submarine officer. After the Navy, he became an expert in all aspects of oil and energy. A former CEO of Ernst & Young Consulting, he was also the Exxon executive who helped supervise the Valdez oil spill cleanup. JD has been interviewed on dozens of television shows as a featured expert on innovation, crisis response, and the future of energy. He has advised Fortune 100 clients, governments, and members of parliament on 5 continents, and has written highly regarded position papers that have been distributed to presidential candidates, MPs, prime ministers, and even royal family members. In later life, he became a Knight of Honor in the Order of St. John. He has been married to Marianne for 30 years and is blessed with 3 children. He's conversational in Mandarin Chinese, enjoys all things adventurous such as fencing, boxing, hiking, and scuba diving. So now let's all take a deep breath because we're going to dive into some of the deepest questions mankind has asked throughout human history. JD's insights were recorded in his new book, 11 Days in May, that we are going to explore today. Welcome, JD Messenger.
Well, thank you, Miriam. It's an honor to be here. This guy sounds fascinating. I look forward to listening to him.
Well, maybe this interview is going to be like your channeled book, and it's going to reveal itself as we go along.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it.
JD, you started as the kind of aspirational material man who reached the absolute pinnacle of success that most people would actually give their eye teeth for. Why did you turn your back on it?
The short answer was it wasn't by conscious choice. I had a terrible injury in 1985 when I was a submarine officer where my neck got smashed and I crushed my vertebrae. And then over a period of 15 years, it healed, and I left the Navy, joined Exxon, left Exxon, joined Ernst & Young. And so I was in Singapore, and I was the CEO of Singapore and Southeast Asia for management consulting. And in 1999, my neck started hurting in the summer, and so I took a Motrin. And then it hurt more, and I took another Motrin. And by the time January 2000 came around, I was popping almost an entire bottle of Motrin every 3 or 4 days. I was in so much pain, in denial, ignoring it. I was too busy to go to the doctor. I was, an important person doing big projects and leading the ExxonMobil merger and things like that, And one morning I woke up and I put my arms in the air to stretch. And, you kind of tilt and pop your neck over. And when I did that, the last thing that was holding my neck together, which was some pieces of something, let go. And it twisted my spinal column and vertebrae around. And it felt like 1,000 volts, through every cell and every nerve, or someone splitting me in half with an axe. And I, of course, screamed, and all of a sudden I left my body, and I'm, a part of me was observing this thing that collapsed like a rag doll and fell on the bureau and then flopped onto the floor, just laying there. And I was wondering, like, I don't feel any pain. I don't feel any emotion. I don't have a body. Whatever is observing is not in that thing laying on the floor. And I went through a tunnel, and it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It looks just like in that movie in Contact. I like to think of it and describe it like, you're going through the exhaust hose on your dryer. You know, it's like this corrugated ribbed tube that turns and twists, and it's a beautiful blue, and it's got, you know, it's like riding through the slide at the water park, and it's got beautiful lights shooting and flying everywhere, and it was beautiful. And I can tell you what happened afterwards, but I'll pause. But that was my wake-up call, and nothing was the same afterwards.
Well, it's interesting. You had an earlier wake-up call when you were a young macho naval cadet. You had a near-death experience then, and I think it planted some seeds. I'm curious as to why they didn't take root at that time.
You know, you're referring to the fact, and you're the first person who has asked me this question and connected the dots. I've actually almost died 4 times. The first time was when I was sailing at the Naval Academy, and my short story is the watch my father had given me before he died, which was the only thing he had ever given me, broke off my wrist, and I dove into the freezing water, and I went down trying to get it, and I couldn't get it. And when I turned to come back up, I couldn't come up. You know, it's freezing cold water. I got sweats. Everything's around me. And I basically, went through that tunnel again, and then find myself on the top of the boat. And here's a fascinating story that will connect the dots, because it's 27 years later. It's 27 years after the near death and drowning. It's 3 years after my breaking my neck and in Singapore. And I go to a holistic fair in Singapore reluctantly that my friend invites me to. And she says, "Oh, you got to go get your aura read." Well, you know, I don't know what an aura is. Something, hurt, and I'm like, no, I've never been to a tarot reader or a psychic or a palm reader. I'm not going to do that. And she pushes. So I do it. And this man was the first man to tell me something, which is the long answer to the question that you asked, what took so long to take root, and I'll answer that. But this man really hammered it right between my eyes. He starts reading my aura, and he goes, about 27 years ago, you nearly drowned. And I'm like, whoa. And he said, it had something to do with your father. I'm like, whoa. And then he says, you have to stop denying how you were saved. And I'm thinking, what? And I said, what do you mean how I'm saved? And I'm starting to relive the experience, one of those defining moments that Dr. Phil talks about. And he says you were saved by Archangel Michael. Well, I can't believe that. But I will tell you, Miriam, that over the next 10 years, even, recently, it still happens all the time, I think twice this year, total strangers come up to me in the most odd situations and describe how I've been saved by Archangel Michael, and over and over and over again. And, when Eric was the man's name in 2003, March or April 2003, 3 years after my wake-up call, he was the first one to say that. And then people I don't even know are yelling at me in the streets, and I'm in denial. I am a left-brain, nuclear engineer, math major. I got 12 years of of physics and metallurgy, biology, chemistry, reactor kinetics, underwater acoustics, blah, blah, blah. I got so much left-brain stuff in my head, I walk with a port list. And so I'm asleep. I'm stuck in the matrix. And I believe that, God, source, the creator, whatever you want to call it, whacked me and said, okay, it's time. You're done playing in the world of form. you've got to take off your mask. And there's a story about my son I'd like to tell that really hammers this home.
No, it's a lovely story, yes.
Well, there's two stories that are both over 1 in a billion coincidences. One of them is in the book. One of them is not in the book, and you're going to want to hear that one. It's about Brian Weiss. But, you know, after in January 2000, after I break my neck and I go through the tunnel, you know, I don't know that I've gone through the tunnel. I don't remember the tunnel. I'm laying on the floor unconscious physically, and I go through surgery. They take bone out of my hip to put my neck together. They say in Singapore that we're not putting anything in his body that wasn't there when he was born. That's what they tell my wife. No cadaver bone, no screws and plates. You know, this, we're going to use, you know, chi energy. We do everything, you know, holistically, and, you know, some Western, some Eastern kind of stuff. So they take bone out of my hip, put my neck together. They have to move my trachea out of the way. You know, I've got tubes sticking in me everywhere. I look like a schooner, you know, with all this rigging. And so 10 days, well, I stabilized for 5 days, surgery, 12 days morphine. You know, like 3 weeks later, I'm at home in a makeshift hospital room, upstairs in a room, door closed. I can't walk. I can't really talk. My shoulder, my neck, everything's in braces. I have no feeling down my arms. There's numb because the nerves were crushed. I can't feel my neck or face, which makes shaving a bit tricky. And I'm depressed. You know, I'm really depressed. I mean, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be doing a merger or negotiating contract. You know, I'm a AAA battery, and all I can do is stare at the swirls in the plaster in the ceiling and smell the flowers. And I basically say a silent prayer to God in great anger. Why did you do this to me? And in less than 2 or 3 minutes, the door handle jiggles, and my 3-year-old son comes in. His name is Grant. And he goes, Daddy, you work too hard. And I'm kind of like, huh? You know? He closes the door and he leaves. And the next day I do it again. I shout this silent prayer. What do you want me to do? And jiggle, jiggle in a couple of minutes. And Grant walks in and he bouncing around and he goes, Daddy, you need to play. I'm like, whoa. And so the left brain nuclear engineer math major calculates the probability. I'm like, you know, I'll skip the numbers and the formulas, but it was 1 in 1,000 times 1 in 1,000. You know, 1 in 1,000 that he did it once, answering a prayer he doesn't hear, coming in any random 3 minutes, having an answer that makes sense. And so twice in a row is 1 in a million. And I'm like, this is interesting. Is Grant reading my mind? Well, if he's reading my mind, how could he give me an answer? So now I'm experimenting and I do it again. And I go, you know, I work too hard. I need to play. What kind of answer is that? Can you give me a better answer? And jiggle, jiggle. Grant comes in, and this time he's bouncing on his toes, and he's singing and bopping around the room, and he's going, remember, remember. Oh, my God. Now, how profound.